Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended weekend forecast. We're going to break down some things in terms of rainfall totals that we actually did record, believe it or not, so far this week here in Central Georgia. Then we'll go into what your weekend specific forecast is looking like for all the outdoor activities we have going on. The Georgia National Fair, football games, football Friday night, of course. And when I say football games, I'm referring to Georgia and Georgia Tech, which will be playing in the near vicinity of here. But we'll cover everything that you need to know for the next week and beyond. Like I said, we're going to start out with some rainfall totals where on October 5th and 6th, so this past Sunday into Monday, we did record some rain at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. The first of which on the 5th, we didn't record quite up to about 1/10 of an inch of rain, but then just over 1/4 of an inch of rain on Monday afternoon. So those two numbers added up, just shy of 1/2 inch of rain in the month of October so far. And if we continue at this pace, we're about 1/3 of the way through the month of October. So obviously, we still wouldn't really get close to that average of 2.34 inches of rain during the month of October as a whole, since we started taking records since the late 1800s, excuse me. And your record set back in 1959, 9.39 inches of rain. Doesn't look like this October has that on tap in terms of some rainfall. And taking a look at 2025 as a whole, we continue to be above average by around 3.5 inches for the entire calendar year. And that's really mainly thanks to this very wet month of August that we did have, 6 inches above what we averagely see in terms of rain in the month of August. September was a pretty dry month, but on average, September is a dry month normally. So hovering just below 3 inches below where we should have been for rainfall in September. In fact, we only really had 1 day of impressive rainfall, and those totals only got up to about 1/4 of an inch. And so far in the month of October, you guessed it, we are still hovering below where we should be at this point, only about 10 days into the month of October. In fact, 9 days into the month of October, as all of this data was taken as of October 9th, but we can continue to head into the last 2 months of the calendar year. And right now we still have a pretty good cushion, being 3.5 inches above average in terms of rainfall. So this past Thursday, we did get an update to our drought monitor. Not too many changes here in Central Georgia. That mainly came in our westernmost counties, where we saw a moderate drought creeping over into portions of Upson County, and then of course Lamar County, Monroe County, Crawford, and Taylor, along with Macon counties. Our south and southeastern counties were in a moderate drought as of the last update a week prior to this, so they still remain in moderate drought criteria. And then we see abnormally dry conditions for the rest of Central Georgia. But something we are seeing is areas of a severe drought being expanded into West Central Georgia, and then of course creeping over into the westernmost edge of Upson County. So what does a severe drought exactly mean? These are going to be the things that you start to see, and it's just basically the same impacts and effects that you see under at moderate drought conditions, just taking it a little bit farther. Crops are going to be stressed, the soil will begin to harden, and conditions will get dustier than usual, given if you do have a very dry stretch. And it has been a relatively dry stretch, but we've had some occasional sprinkles in the forecast the last couple of days. We need some sunshine in the forecast. We need that ground to really dry out in order to see maybe some dusty conditions that could pop up in the vicinity of us. But this is just under severe drought criteria. The only area that's under that is western Upson County as of right now. So small streams will begin to dry up. We were talking about streams and maybe even some swampy areas. Some of those very small bodies of water, they can begin to see their water levels get a lot lower. Well, those very small bodies of water can begin to dry up in severe drought conditions, and river levels are going to begin to run low. Once again, this is just if all of Central Georgia maybe was to be included in a severe drought, but giving you a bit of a foreshadowing about what could be in store, because we have a pretty good dry stretch that we are going to kick off. So look out for and follow guidance from officials like the National Weather Service, whatever the drought monitor does issue out there, including things like wildfire safety, especially given how gusty our winds have been over recent days. If we continue to have a very dry forecast, you pair those winds up with some really low humidity, that can result in some fire danger statements or even some red flag warnings, where some of that prescribed burning and some of that controlled burning is definitely discouraged, or you're only going to want to do so when the conditions are suitable, or only do so if you know what you're doing. But these are all the symptoms of a severe drought. Like I said, not many areas, only that western edge of Upson County is in a severe drought as of right now. But if we continue to go into a very dry stretch, then of course those conditions of severe drought will expand farther into central Georgia. But as of right now, your weekend forecast, it could bring us some much needed rain. Let's take a look at what the latest run of Future View has. And all eyes are going to be over to the east and southeast of us. That's where a coastal low pressure system is looking to develop over the course of Friday, and it's going to continue to move up the Atlantic coast, or maybe pretty close to us here in central Georgia over the course of this weekend. So Friday, we have been talking about it, holding on to gloomy conditions, maybe the chance of a very light shower that's going to be very spotty, more than likely chance that you just stay dry all throughout your Friday afternoon and evening plans. But this right there around evening commute time, maybe heading out to Tailgate 13 will be in Milledgeville at GMC for Tailgate 13, and I believe it's week 9 of that. So I think we have another week or two before you start to get into the time that the first round of the playoffs are starting. Let's go ahead and fast forward all the way into 10, 11 o'clock later tonight as those games are wrapping up. Still a few light showers that could be present in our southeasternmost counties. East and southeastern counties are going to kind of be a theme as we go throughout this weekend because those areas will be closer to the center of this low pressure system. That means that it's going to be a slightly more humid environment, and you also are going to have maybe some breezier conditions in those select areas. But that's mainly for Friday into the first part of Saturday. It does look like a lot of the cloud cover is trying to clear out as we go overnight. But here's Saturday morning, 8 a.m. as you're waking up, getting out of bed, pouring yourself a morning coffee, getting ready to turn on College game day. Still some light shower chances the farther east that you are, along with better cloud coverage. And now as we go into Saturday afternoon, it does look like that cloud cover continues to build back over to the west. Very similar to what our cloud cover has been doing over the course of Friday. But then we go all the way into Saturday evening. Those showers are a bit more widespread, still mainly light in nature, but some pockets of steady rain as we go into Saturday evening. We could very well see our fair share of rain chances that are trying to creep in if this coastal low does begin to move closer onshore into portions of South Carolina. Right now, the center of it is just around the Charleston area where you're starting to see a sharp gradient and some of those longer and faster moving wind arrows. Now let's go all the way into the nighttime hours. Take a look at this. Once again, widespread light showers, some pockets of steady rain. It looks like there's more and more rain that's trying to creep into the vicinity of central Georgia. And then as we go all the way into Sunday morning, we start to see that center of circulation creep back over to the west. And this is just as of the latest model run. We've only continued to see agreement over the last 12 or so hours. So as of really Friday morning, that rain chances are improving for central Georgia, mainly for the second half of Saturday into the first part of Sunday. But take a look at how widespread this rain is. Some pockets of steadier and heavier rain with some yellows and oranges. So once again, this legend up here, as you go farther over to the right, you start to see some of those darker colors. That indicates your heavier rainfall rates. And this is the scene that you could be walking out the door to for church at 9 a.m. Definitely not set in stone. You will see that reciprocated on my next 3 days and my weekend outlook forecast, because this is just very, very new data that we're continuing to see. And that's in the scenario that the center of low pressure, you can start to see the center of all that spin just to the northwest of Charleston. That's if this center moves onshore into South Carolina, maybe creeps a little bit farther over to the west. We could see our fair share of some tropical rain and moisture in the forecast for the most part of the first half of Sunday. We start to see some of those showers breaking apart as we go into the afternoon, really more so the evening hours on Sunday, but still keeping the cloudy atmosphere until finally we go all the way to midnight. It looks like we finally start to see that cloud cover move back over from the west over towards the east, but still plenty of scattered showers that could be in the cards. I think your rain chances this weekend, really depend on the humidity levels. Obviously, we're going to need our fair share of moisture to have some widespread rain like that. Well, as we continue about Friday into the evening and nighttime hours, it looks like that wedge is still very profound. Those northeasterly winds ushering in that cooler and drier air. So it does look like the first part of your Saturday morning is going to be relatively dry. But as that light green color tries to creep closer and closer to us here in central Georgia, that could be just enough humidity for at least a few spotty sprinkles. I don't really buy it in terms of the widespread rain that we do see for the first part of Sunday. Take a look at this. Dew point temperatures in Macon itself still in the mid 50s. That's a pretty dry atmosphere. And this is right around the time that we were seeing that widespread rain all over central Georgia. Doesn't look like every single area here has sufficient humidity in order to sprout some widespread showers in nature. And we actually don't even see any areas of that dark green color, but I don't think this is quite matching up with what the graph model was saying. You can see that center of circulation is more so to the east of Charleston, right there around Charleston. It looks like this model run where we get the humidity values has the system moving on shore a little bit farther over to the east and then continuing to move up to the northeast along the Atlantic coast. But it does look like we could have some slightly more humidity in the forecast as compared to what we were seeing as of the last couple of days. In terms of the breezy conditions, I think we'll have some isolated pockets of gusts up to 30 miles per hour possible, but most of central Georgia will see some gusts between 20 and 25 miles per hour. Doesn't look like we're getting rid of that breeze into your Friday evening plans as we go all the way to Saturday morning. Still a pretty windy start to the day and going into Saturday afternoon. Once again, still a pretty windy time period that we're going to have with those gusts up to 20 and 25 miles per hour. We go all the way to Sunday and still seeing shades of yellow, some pockets of maybe some red colors in a select few areas, but it doesn't look like the gusty winds will be widespread all over central Georgia throughout Sunday. I think the farther west that you are, you're not going to feel as much of the impacts as opposed to areas, say, farther to the east that are closer to the center of this low pressure system as it continues to move up the Atlantic coast. And now we go all the way to Monday at 3 a.m. Looks like we finally see the wind subside just a bit, and that center of circulation still somewhere right there, maybe around Charleston, or maybe it's already moved up the Atlantic coast. We can actually see some gustier winds up into central North Carolina as opposed to coastal South Carolina. So here's how it stands as of right now. Obviously, if you're watching this on Saturday, you're watching this on Sunday, this forecast is very likely to change. I am pretty confident in your high temperature for Friday, 72 degrees. That's if we get some peaks of sunshine. If we don't get any peaks of sunshine, you very well may not get out of the 60s. So temperature is definitely going to be a whole lot cooler. Only a 10% chance of a spotty light shower, and then it will still be another cool start to your Saturday morning, 77 degrees, and about a 20% chance of seeing some light showers, maybe even a pocket of some steady rain. I do think Sunday, as of right now, is trending to be your best day of seeing some rain chances, mainly for the morning and early afternoon time frame. I think as we go into the second half of Sunday, we really start to see a lot of that rain taper off. And 80 is your high temperature if we see some sunshine. If we continue to have the cloud cover very widespread, that's going to limit the warm up, and we may be somewhere in the upper 60s to low 70s each of the next 3 days into the weekend. So it would be a good thing if you're looking for some of the cooler temperatures. And this wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I know obviously it does get in the way of some of your weekend plans, but I was just talking about that severe drought, some of the levels of moderate drought that have been expanded into central Georgia. We definitely could use some rain. And if this comes in the form of some widespread showers that could be making for a bit of a messy forecast this weekend, I think it's a trade-off that we will definitely take. And I know your backyard garden and any of your flower pots will greatly appreciate any hydration they can get from Mother Nature. But right now, these rain chances are written in pencil. Make sure that you're tuning in over the course of this weekend. It is one of those weekends that you'll want to keep a close eye on the forecast, especially for any outdoor plans that you do have. So for football Friday night specifically, temperatures in the 60s from tailgate all the way down to the end of games. Football weather, to say the least. This is definitely some football weather for the month of October. 65 is going to run somewhere around 15 to maybe even 16 degrees below what our average high is. Obviously, around kickoff time, not going to be when we typically hit our high temperatures. 68 right around kickoff is still going to be somewhere around where I think that high temperature is going to hit, and temperatures just getting cooler, maybe still a few light shower chances. You'll want to have the raincoat and the umbrella ready to go, and just keep it handy over the course of your Friday evening plans. Along with that, keep it handy over the course of this entire weekend. So for your fair forecast, I made this with the model run of Future View this morning. Saturday was originally looking like a lot clearer of a day, but now it looks like it's going to be another gloomy day in the forecast. We could have some light showers scattered regardless of what the temperatures say, like I said, I still think that your forecast for anything this week is going to be kind of a play it by ear basis, and you'll want to just prepare for the worst with having that rain gear handy. And of course, expect the best. If you don't run into anything in the way of rain, you don't need to use the rain jacket, not a bad thing whatsoever. Sunset going to be at 7:07 on Friday, 7:06 on Saturday, and then Sunday it will be at 7:05. So that sunset continues to get a bit earlier each and every day by about a minute or two. A north and northeasterly breeze. Sustained winds about 10 to 15 miles per hour. So that's what the winds are consistently blowing at. You could have those occasional gusts that get up to around 25, maybe even some isolated pockets of 30 mile per hour breezes, but not as confident in that over towards the west in western Houston County. Macon Beer Fest was looking like an amazing forecast. We could have some cloud cover, and if we have more cloud cover, then of course your temperature is not going to hit these thresholds in the mid to upper 70s. We could have temperatures somewhere in the upper 60s, the low 70s, but the Macon Beer Festival, I still do believe it's going to be a good forecast for it. You're maybe just going to want to dress with some jeans, maybe some khaki pants, or some form of a light jacket just to keep you a bit warmer, because that breeze will make things feel a tad bit cooler at times. That will be taking place on the corner of Poplar Street and the 3rd Street Park, 2 to 7 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. So no excuse really to not head out to the Macon Beer Festival or the Georgia National Fair, any of our weekend activities that we do have. But if you're heading out of town, maybe going up to the flats to check out the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets squaring off against the Virginia Tech Hokies, it's a 3:30 kickoff. I think your conditions the farther west and northwest that you go are a lot clearer than what we're talking about here in central Georgia. So the farther away from this coastal low that you go, your conditions are looking a lot nicer and a tad bit warmer possibly. The more sunshine that you get, it will allow for a warm up somewhere into the mid to upper 70s right there around kickoff time. Going into sunset time as you're heading home after the Yellow Jackets hopefully pull out another win and continue to stay undefeated. Getting cooler, 68 degrees for a temperature, so pack the light jacket. It is going to be some great football weather up in Atlanta this weekend. And the Georgia Bulldogs, yes, they are out of town this weekend, but Auburn only about a 2 to 3 hour drive from most areas here in central Georgia. For tailgate time, going to be incredible and nice and sunny. 7:30 kickoff. So yes, the sun will have already set by then over in Auburn, especially given the fact that their sunset is at 6:13 in the evening. So obviously Auburn is in a different time zone than us. They typically see the sunset just a tad bit earlier because they're on the very edge of that time zone. They're almost in that Eastern time zone, but technically classified as Central Time. Anywho, it will be a bit of a chilly forecast if you're heading over to Jordan-Hare Stadium over out there in the Plains. Hopefully the Dogs can pull out a nice W, continue to get back on track to set up a nice top 10 matchup in Athens against Ole Miss next week. But obviously have a game to get through before we even talk about next week. And the main thing that you'll need to know if you are heading over to the west should be some clearer conditions, but will also be some cooler temperatures, especially around kickoff time and getting into when you're heading home around 11 p.m., maybe even a little bit later if the game goes to overtime. So temperatures are expected to drop down into the 50s overnight Saturday into Sunday. For your weekend grillcast, I think Friday is going to be the day that you want to head out, maybe fire up the grill. Saturday and Sunday, you're just going to want to have caution. Utilize our 24/7 stream that we have on 13 WMAZ+. You can get a good idea of what that satellite and radar image is looking like. If you don't see any rain near you, I still think you're looking good to go. But Saturday and Sunday, we could have some showers that are still in the forecast. Not making for the best grilling conditions, but not necessarily an order in kind of night. And the heat of the grill should hopefully help keep you a bit warmer if you are heading out there this weekend. Here's a look at the long range models. The good news is by Monday, we have a lot more certainty with your forecast. Whatever moisture is to the east of us or to the northeast of us, that will continue to move farther and farther away. What are we left with here in central Georgia? Nice and clear skies, completely sunny conditions through the beginning of next week. That will result in a steady warm up back up into the 80s, but we'll talk about those 80s because it does look like the humidity is going to remain at some reasonable levels. But maybe getting some rain in the form of the widespread showers I was talking about on Sunday wouldn't be a bad thing because it doesn't look like there is a drop of rain Monday through Friday as we go into the work week next week. So it will be a very opportune trade-off. Obviously, temperatures will be a little bit warmer. That will be paired up with some drier air, some nice and conducive afternoon plans weather, maybe some evening dinner time plans. But we definitely do need the rain given how many areas are abnormally dry, moderate, or in a moderate drought, or in a severe drought, and it doesn't look like Mother Nature is giving us a drop of rain as we go into the midweek next week. Here's a look at your morning low temperatures, mid 50s, maybe some upper 50s by the time we transition into the end of the work week next week. The main thing that I want to tell you with this is, yes, right there around average, but these temperatures going to have a bit of a chill to them, especially if you pair them up with the breeze like we had this past Friday morning. But your afternoon high temperatures are going to see a warming trend somewhere in the low to mid 80s as we go about Monday all the way through Thursday. Here you see it in the top of your screen. Average high this time of year, 81 degrees. So some slightly above average temperatures, but they will feel a lot more pleasant. We have mid 80s present and during Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this past work week. But that was paired up with some muggy conditions. We won't be pairing up these numbers with muggy conditions. The humidity should still stay at some reasonable levels or some really dry levels. So these temperatures will actually feel like what they read. Now taking a look past that, we go into October 17th all the way into the 23rd. So that is going to be all the way into next Thursday, all the way to the following Friday, I do believe. The math might be a little bit off right there. I haven't looked at the calendar, but it does look like we have a slight probability of some above average temperatures during that time period, indicating that rain doesn't look to even be in your extended forecast. So like I said, maybe Sunday could be one of our last opportunities for rain for quite some time. You see that idea reciprocated on the precipitation outlook for that same window, the 17th through the 23rd of October. Pretty slight probability once again of having below normal rainfall, and that is not only the case for us, but South Carolina, Alabama, portions of North Florida, Mississippi, all the way up into North Carolina as well. So it doesn't look like much rain is on the horizon, and it does look like your temperatures are going to hover right there around average or maybe just slightly above average. Looking ahead, what do we have to look forward to? Obviously, the big thing to look forward to was fall break, maybe getting into the first day of October, the Georgia National Fair. Well, now the next thing to really look forward to is going to be Halloween, which is in 21 days. So that is hard to believe. Halloween will be in 3 weeks exactly from this past Friday. So obviously Halloween being on a Friday, many of you probably going to have some weekend plans. Hopefully we can dial up a clear and a cooler forecast for you as we celebrate. Now we go into Election Day, which is just 4 days after Halloween, the following Tuesday. That will be in 25 days. Veterans Day will be happening in 32 days. So kind of that random day that you get in the middle of the week that your kids have off school. And then Thanksgiving. Less than 50 days away from Thanksgiving, celebrating with friends and family, and obviously getting into a really good football day. Always excited to watch those football games on Thanksgiving Day, and that will be less than 50 days away, and our temperatures should definitely be a whole lot cooler by then. So let's talk about some tropics. It has been a bit of an active week, but overall, in terms of some tropical systems impacting us, not looking like we're still going to see anything. Here is Tropical Storm Jerry, which formed this past Tuesday at 11 a.m. Jerry has maintained tropical storm status and was forecasted originally to strengthen into a Category 1 hurricane. And some model runs did even show Category 2 strength, but now it looks like the cone is just hinting at Jerry is going to remain a pretty strong tropical storm. It did impact areas of the northeastern Caribbean, so kind of on the northern Leeward Islands, getting close to the Virgin Islands. Now it's going to begin its northward turn. It's moving to the northwest at 16 miles per hour currently, 50 mile per hour winds as you go about this weekend, 60 mile per hour winds, maybe a slight uptick. Looks like it's going to head really close up to Bermuda, but once it gets up to Bermuda, it's going to hit that stop sign, turn on the right blinker, and it's going to go back out into the Atlantic Ocean and should start to finally dissipate as we go into the midweek next week. And something we got as of this past Friday morning, really scratching my head why the National Hurricane Center gave this any sort of a named storm. You can see the satellite imagery and it is tiny, teeny, teeny, tiny, but it does have some winds that are spinning around 45 miles per hour. This is subtropical storm Karen, and it did form, and it's not going to have too much more of a lifespan. Take a look at where it's located. It's probably kind of hard to see, but look on the right side of your screen, some of these landmarks. That is Paris, that is London, Lisbon, Portugal, and of course Spain over there on the right side of your screen. This is in the North Atlantic Ocean. So all this is going to do is maybe stir up some of the fish habitats, and obviously, hopefully a lot of those fish are beginning to swim away from the path of this subtropical storm. Not expected to be too strong. Really didn't have very impressive chances of developing whatsoever. As of this past Thursday, it had a 10% chance of development. Then it popped up to 60, and then it got its name storm for Karen. But it is another tropical storm, or subtropical storm, I guess I should say, but it will cross off another name on the hurricane season list for the Atlantic Ocean this year. So Karen claims the 11th named storm that we've seen so far in the Atlantic hurricane season. The next names to claim will be Lorenzo, Melissa, and Nestor. And of course, 11 named storms. How does that compare to what was forecasted? Maybe what's on average? Well, on average, we typically see 14 named tropical storms. Then that's going back for data as early as the early 1900s, maybe the late 1800s. Of those tropical storms, we see normally around half of them strengthen into hurricane status, so get winds of 74 plus miles per hour. And of those hurricanes, we normally see 3 of them that are major hurricanes, so a category 3 or above. Here's our forecast from Colorado State, who normally does a pretty good job with this forecast, but they forecasted a slightly above average season. Not as active as what we did see last year, but they forecasted 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. Well, here's our numbers as of October 10th. 11 named storms, so creeping really close to that average of 14, but still 6 storms off of what was forecasted by Colorado State. 4 hurricanes is what we have seen so far, and obviously 7 hurricanes is what we normally see in a hurricane season. 9 is what was forecasted. Still 5 hurricanes off of what we are supposed to see according to Colorado State. But the most shocking thing is we've seen 3 major hurricanes, so we're right on average and only 1 major hurricane off of what was forecasted. Now, very thankfully, all those major hurricanes have stayed out at sea, and we even had 2 out of those 3 major hurricanes strengthened to Category 5 status. That was Hurricane Erin and that was Hurricane Umberto. Hurricane Gabrielle, I believe, got up to Category 4 status, but all of those kind of took a turn back out into the Atlantic Ocean. Well, we're kind of running out of time to get some more named storms to maybe hit those average marks. As you can see, we do see kind of this last peak right here in the tropical season in terms of the frequency of tropical storms and hurricanes. Hurricanes is going to be in that yellow color, and then hurricanes and tropical storms will be in this red color, obviously indicating that the frequency of just getting a named storm along with a hurricane is going to happen a lot more often as opposed to maybe just a hurricane, because you need some really good strengthening in order to get that. So October 20th is kind of that last peak right there. I think honestly we're really close to where this last peak is in the red and here down in the yellow. It does look like over the course of the next week or so we're going to see a drastic downtick in the frequency of activity. But we still can see some named storms into the late portions of October, into early November. In fact, the end of this past week has marked the anniversary of Hurricane Milton. Many of you probably remember that last year. Impacted areas of Tampa Bay, down in Sarasota, had its fair share of tornadoes that it did sprout down in southern Florida, which was probably one of the most atypical things. Obviously, we talk about that dirty side of the storm, and typically they can start to sprout some tornado warnings or some tornado warned storms, but these tornadoes were rather large, something that you would typically see in Oklahoma in the months of April or May. That was happening down in South Florida, some of the biggest tornadoes we've ever seen in that area. So going to show you that obviously still well into the month of October, we can see not only some named storms, but also some pretty strong storms form, but it does look like the frequency is going down as we transition farther into the back half of October, and eventually November is typically a pretty quiet tropical month, but we will have hurricane season go all the way to the end until November 30th. So that's everything you need to know for your extended forecast. Moral of the story, at least for any weekend plans that you have, do not go anywhere without having that rain gear ready to go. The rain chances are still a bit uncertain. We've continued to see a whole lot of change in between the models. And as we always tell you, weather can change in the snap of a fingers, in the blink of an eye. So you'll want to keep a close eye on that forecast for any outdoor plans that you have, specifically on Saturday into the early portion of Sunday. I imagine right now it is trending towards being a wetter first half of the day on Sunday. Definitely going to want to make sure that you have that rain jacket ready to go for that morning commute out to church or anything else that you do have planned on your Sunday afternoon. So continue to stay posted with Ainsley Parker and David Guerrero over the course of this weekend. And if there is anything that you need to know, the worst case scenario really is just a bunch of rain, some pretty dreary conditions, and then some gusty winds. But like I said, we could definitely use the rain. It wouldn't be an all-in-all horrible forecast if we were to see some widespread showers on Sunday. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at 11 a.m. on Monday for another look at your extended forecast.